Albert Fish is known as one of the most notorious serial killers of all time. He killed and ate over 100 children, both boys and girls. This is his story. Fish grew up in a family with a serious history of mental illnesses. This included his uncle, who suffered from severe anxiety, their brother, who was confined in a state mental institution. Not long after, his sister was diagnosed with a mental affliction. And to top it all off, his mother had audible and visual hallucinations, hearing whispers, seeing things only she could see. It made it incredibly hard for the Fish family to be, well, a family. At the age of 5, Albert was placed into an orphanage by his very own mother, due to the fact that his father had recently died. During his time in the orphanage, Albert was abused, as most other children there were. But after some time, he started to enjoy the abuse and beatings in a sexual manner. After 4 long, abusive years in his newfound home, Fish's mother finally took her son back, and at this time, Fish was a mere 9 years old. Albert's childhood was filled with abuse and wrongdoings, so much that at age 12, he started eating and drinking his own feces. During this time in his life, Fish began an unusual hobby, one where he would go to public baths and watch as other boys undressed right before his eyes. He spent a great portion of his weekends doing just that. Not much else is recorded about his childhood, as many of these things didn't catch the eyes of everyone. They weren't murders of small children or the feasting on young boys and girls. Yet. At age 20, Fish arrived in New York City. He became a male prostitute and started the constant raping of boys. His preferred targets were below the age of 6 for 8 horrific and graphic years. Flash forward to Fish at age 28. He's married and has 6 children, all an indecent cover-up for the man he really was. It wasn't all sunshine and roses on the cover of Fish's life, though. In 1903, he was arrested for grand larceny, or in layman's terms, stealing the personal property of another person. After the trial, he was sentenced to incarceration. There is no record of how long he was incarcerated for, but we do know that soon after he was released, he did the unthinkable. Fish's newest victim was a 19-year-old named Thomas Kedden. Albert kidnapped Thomas and tortured him for 2 weeks on a small farm in Delaware. Near the end of the torture, Fish decided against killing Thomas. Instead, Mr. Kedden's penis was cut in half and left in a Vaseline-soaked cloth. Before leaving, Albert left a crisp $10 bill with Thomas and headed back to New York City. After his initial arrest, Fish's wife left him and the children. Now, right out of jail, Fish was stuck without a job and multiple children. This induced Fish to go into a severe depression, causing self-harm and consuming human meat left and right, as a way to get out of his depressive state. In some cases, he even fed his own children human meat without their knowledge, often targeting the handicapped and African American due to his personal feelings on how the world viewed them. In his eyes, no one cared if this specific set of people would go missing, so he assumed it was easy pickings for himself. One night, Fish made a grave mistake, ending his spree for one girl at a party. One night while at a party, Fish found some old friends of his. One of the friends had a daughter named Grace Budd. This was the first time in a few years that Albert had seen Grace, and after a couple hours, he asked Grace's parents to take her out to another party. The parents graciously allowed her to go, knowing that Fish was a good friend. After telling Grace to wait outside, Fish went in and took all of his clothes off in the upstairs bedroom. He then yelled to Grace out the window to come in and go upstairs, and she did exactly that. Once inside, Fish murdered Grace. After the cleanup, he sent a letter to Grace's parents, explaining in detail how their daughter was murdered and just how tasty she was. After finding the letter, the landlady of Grace's household called the chief investigator. He waited outside Fish's room in New York and successfully captured him. Fish was officially put into custody, where he admitted to molesting over 400 children. How he tortured and killed several others in grave detail. It is not for certain if this number was what the murderer's tally actually ran up to. During his trial, the court found Fish to be sane and guilty of all charges. Fish was given the death sentence on January 16, 1936, to electric chair, ending the spree of Albert Fish.